Okay, good morning, everybody, or good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you happen to be joining us from. Welcome to the 8th Mathsport International Conference, the first virtual one, which brings all sorts of challenges and opportunities. If anybody else gets the notifications about admitting people, please do feel able to click on them to admit people into the meeting, because I won't necessarily be able to respond to all of them very quickly. So please do feel free, if you get notifications to let people in, to let them in to the meeting. So again, welcome. This is our 8th Mathsport International Conference. It feels like a very long time since we last all met together. It's been the usual 2 years since we last met in Athens in 2019. But these 2 years have felt like decades, given the impact that COVID-19 has had and is still having around the world. Back in 2019, Mathsport 7 took place in Athens, and today and tomorrow it takes place wherever you happen to be, which in itself is quite something. Just as a quick matter of admin, if you've joined us, if you could put your microphone on mute, that will just be very helpful in terms of making sure that there isn't any interference and noise.
James, have you muted yourself?
Thank you. I did manage to mute myself somehow. How about that? But thank you for the notification. Back to where we were. So I asked everyone to mute themselves and managed to mute myself somehow. But we're back, and as I said, we're taking place online wherever you happen to be. We've got participants from New Zealand, from Australia, Japan, India, all across Europe and into North and South America. So we really are spanning the globe. We're going to have a lot of presentations, a lot of delegates attending from all sorts of different parts of the world. So good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you happen to be. Next year, COVID permitting, we will meet again, and we'll meet again physically, and we'll meet in Reading here in the southeast of the UK. And at that point, we'll endeavour to match the excellent hosting of the fantastic event that we've had over the years with Salford, Groningen, Leuven, Loughborough, Padua, and Athens over the years. But in the meantime, we are virtual with all of the opportunities, but also the costs associated as well. We're all probably quite weary after the virtual 17 months we've had of meetings online now, but does offer this opportunity for global meetings, for still getting together regularly and hearing the work of some of the finest minds across our various disciplines, doing research across different aspects of sport. As part of today's schedule, we're going to have the S training session chaired by Christophe Ley. He's been organising this excellent initiative over the last year or so, joining researchers together across a range of fields who work on sport and organising monthly online seminars during the pandemic. Then tomorrow afternoon, we're going to wrap up with something called the Roses session. Roses stands for the Reading Online Sport Economics Seminars, and this is another response to the pandemic that's been going on over the last year, weekly online sport economics research seminars. And these two initiatives will carry on once we conclude the Mathsport 8 conference tomorrow afternoon, and they'll give you a chance for a regular shot of top research from around the world on a regular basis over the next few months, as hopefully we start to emerge from the pandemic. There'll be opportunities to sign up for both, talk to either Christophe or myself about that. And this afternoon, we also have a keynote talk that I'm massively looking forward to from Luigi Colombo, who's the head of the quantitative team at Smart Odds. He's going to present on market efficiency in sport betting, and as such, his talk fits in very nicely with a number of the other talks that we've got today, starting at 9:30 in the parallel session. And so on to organisational aspects of this. Today and tomorrow, we're going to be in this, we're going to be on Teams. Today, we're going to be in this meeting where we are right now, but we're also going to have a parallel session as well. So there'll be another room B, whatever we might want to call it, where other talks are going to take place, usual parallel sessions, but virtually. Excuse me. And so the first of those parallel talks starts in just a few minutes, in 10 minutes time. I'll try and post links. You should have emails, and there's information on the website as well about the schedule. Excuse me. As is a fairly common convention, in general, the final speaker in each session will chair the session. So please, if you are chairing, try to ensure that you keep to time in order to enable delegates to move between rooms. Of course, it's a little bit easier on the virtual to move between rooms. You don't have to walk and find the other room, and you can sneak in the back so long as your camera's turned off and you're on mute. And that's worth keeping your camera off when you're moving between rooms, just so that you don't appear on the screen when you move into a new room. In all the parallel sessions, talks have got a half-hour slot. It's the roses and the S trading talks that are slightly longer than the keynote talk. So in the parallel sessions, talks have got a half-hour slot, but to allow time for questions, please try and keep your talks to 20 minutes if you're presenting, and there'll be time for Q&A at the end. If you've got questions, please do raise your hand using the hand function. Hopefully you've seen that. If you're able to see it, please do use the chat function as well. And as much as possible, keep your microphones on mute, especially during the talks. On one more practical note is that I'm aiming, technology permitting, to record all of the talks during the conference. With the permission of the speakers, we will try and place these talks online at a later point. And so I'll be in touch with individual speakers to seek their consent. Then, because of the wide range of time zones involved, it's a little bit odd to have a lunch break as sorts, but we will still break up the talks with a coffee break and a lunch break today. And do use that opportunity to stretch your legs and get some exercise, because it can be quite hard to do that in the virtual environment when we're just sat at our computers all the time. And so with that in mind, I'm not packing the schedule with additional online events such as social events in this conference. I think that's something that we just can't do effectively in the virtual, but hopefully when we return to organising the conference physically in Reading next year, we'll try and match the fantastic social events that we've had in recent years at this conference. So as I said, please do in the breaks that we've got, get up, stretch your legs and get some fresh air. What I will do is I'll take a few minutes during each lunch break. So that's the lunch in the kind of conventional European time slot. And I'll mark a couple of things, I'll do a couple of things in the lunch break. I want to today spend a few minutes marking a sad event that's occurred in the last couple of days. One of our keynote speakers from 2011, Professor Stefan Kassen, sadly passed away this week. And so I'll take up about 15 minutes of the lunch break today to talk a little bit about Stefan and his many great contributions to the field of sport and sports economics in particular over the years. And there'll be some time for others to reflect on that should they wish to as well. And then a little bit more trivially, tomorrow during lunchtime, we'll spend a little bit of time thinking about forecasts for the remainder of the European Championships tournament that's ongoing. My apologies if you're not a big football fan, but we'll spend a little bit of time doing that. Now, before we begin to move virtually into the rooms where the talks are taking place, I want to first of all hand to one of my fellow members of the organisational committee, that is Dries Goossens, who has a few words to say. So, Dries, there you are, I can see you, so go ahead.
Yes, thank you, James. So on behalf of the Mathsport committee, I'd like to say a few things. As you may know, Mathsport International has family. There is the Anziam Mathsport, which focuses on Australia, New Zealand, and there is Mathsport Asia. So the next Anziam Mathsport conference is planned for 2022 in Melbourne, Australia. And there were plans to organize Mathsport Asia in India last year, but I mean, as you can imagine, the COVID pandemic has made that impossible. And they are now aiming for winter 2022 for their second conference. So with Mathsport International in Reading next year as well, 2022 will be a very busy year. Now, we will post all information on our website, mathsportinternational.com, and on the website of the Euro Working Group OR in Sports. And even better, you can become a member of OR in Sports for free. You can very easily register on the website, and then you'll receive regular emails with all kinds of events of interest. And then let me also thank Phil Scarf. Phil Scarf recently resigned as the chair of Mathsport. And in a way, I think it's thanks to Phil that we're all here today, because Phil started Mathsport back in 2007 with a conference in Manchester. And back in the days, if you were doing research on sports and mathematics, there were really not so many options to present your work or to get in touch with other researchers with a passion for sports. So I think by starting Mathsport and supporting it over all these years, Phil has been very helpful for our community. So I know Phil wouldn't want to make too much fuss about all this, but a thank you and a round of applause is, I believe, the least we can do. So I invite you, perhaps also as a test, to turn on your microphone and to make some noise for Phil.
Okay, thanks, Dries.
Thanks,
Did
Phil.
you want to go on? Carry on, sorry.
Yeah, and thanks everyone. Enjoy the conference.
Thanks, Dries. That's the first slightly awkward online conference moment there. We've now got a few minutes to move into sessions. So hopefully you will have had the links to the two sessions. What you can do is what I'm currently doing is you can be in both, but be on hold in one and the other. So that enables you to switch between the sessions quite easily. But what we're going to have here in the main room starting now is the session COVID-19 1, hosted by or chaired by Roel Lambers. And then we're going to have a session parallel 2 in the second room, which is on betting and forecasting, chaired by Ed Wheatcroft. And so hopefully you are able to see the schedule, and hopefully you're able to move into the appropriate room for the talk. So in this room, we'll start in a few moments with the session COVID-19 1. The first talk will be by Christophe Ley for the Probabilistic Final Standing Calculator. There'll be talks by Eiji Konaka, Anthony Macedo, and Roel Lambers. And then in session 2, parallel 2 session on betting and forecasting, talks by Marius Erting, David Winkelmann, Ed Wheatcroft, and Jean-Louis Fury. So please do, if you're able to. I will now spend a little bit of time popping between rooms to make sure that everybody is okay in both of the rooms, and I'll try and make sure that we can do the recording in both of the rooms. Our chair for the session in here is Roel, who I can see is here, so that's good. Perfect.
Yeah, I'm here.
Fantastic. And so, and then we're going to have obviously Christophe talking first. So I'm sure Christophe's fine with sharing his screen. But Roel, if it's okay, I'll leave it with you to chair from here, and I'll be lurking in and around in case anything goes terribly wrong.
Yeah, welcome, Christophe. I see that you're already here.
Yes, I'm here. I actually, it's weird. No, I'm clicking on the share content.
Yeah.
And I cannot search the window I want to share. Weirdly enough, I just see their window and there seem to be 6, which is weird. So it's a bit strange. Just trying to figure that out. What is the problem?
I see 2 options. Like one is the screen that I'm looking at right now, and the other one is called window or something, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then I think if you click on that, then you get
okay,
like all the options. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks. Great. Now you should see my screen. Yeah. Okay. Great. Thank you. I should say that before we start, it's an apology. With these online meetings, I made a mistake. I accepted another meeting that is also scheduled for today, and my talk there is in 1 hour. So I will have to. It was a bit unclear because that was Chinese time with the English time, so I cannot listen to all the talks. I would like to apologize. Not out of lack of interest, but just because I made a booking mistake.
Yeah. Okay. There's still people coming in, but
Yeah.
So maybe in a minute or so we can start, I guess.
Should I go full screen or is it okay like this?
I would do full screen. Yeah, I don't know if you want to see people looking at you, but I would just do the full screen, right?
Yeah, I'll go into full screen. Yeah. Now you should see better.
No, I'm only seeing a black screen. I don't know if that's the same with other people.
Same for me as well.
Oh, okay, strange. For me, I am on the full screen now. So perhaps I should go back then.
Yes, now it returns.
Yeah.
I'll try again with the full screen. But if it, so now for me it is full screen. Is it again black for you?
Nothing has changed for me so far.
Okay.
Are you sharing a particular window or your desktop, Christophe?
That might be it. Perhaps he doesn't like the window. It's possible.
So I think if you share just to the specific application that your PDF is open in, then you should be able to see it as you move through it and go on full screen.
That's what I have actually. I have it. I have it only on this PDF, and I made that full screen, but somehow it doesn't work. I don't know why.
Could you try Control L or something? Or...
That's what I was doing actually. Control L. But that's what it doesn't want to take. One more try. Not working.
No.
Because I see it perfectly full screen here. No, okay, good. Then I probably best leave it at this.
Probably best, yeah.
Well, this will work. It's
yeah.
It's fine, I guess. Okay, I guess everybody's here as well. Oh no, it's not true. Okay. So I would like to introduce the first speaker, who is Christophe Ley, if I'm pronouncing it correctly, from Ghent University. And he's going to talk about a probabilistic final standing calculator. So Christophe, go ahead.
Well, thank you very much. It is my pleasure to give a talk here at this very nice conference. And indeed, I'm going to talk about our probabilistic final standing calculator, which we developed over the past year and which had indeed to do with COVID-19. This is joint work with my PhD student Hans van Eetvelde and with Lars Magnus Wattem, who I think is somebody that most of you also know from as a regular visitor of the Mathsport and of mathematics-related sports research. So in 2020, of course, whom am I saying this? There was the huge uncertainty, and we did not know what would happen when the seasons got stopped. Will they be able to resume? Yes or no? That was the huge uncertainty. And the Dutch Eredivisie was the first in Europe to declare its final stop on April 25th. It got then followed by the French Ligue 1 on April 28th and our Belgian Jupiler Pro League on May 15th. So those leagues, they decided we put a full stop on the season. While the four big leagues, they decided to resume play. The Bundesliga was the first to do so, which was also not bad. Well, a good choice for them because it seemed to be safe enough, and they had all the focus of the football world on them. Followed by the Premier League, Primera Division, and the Serie A. Of course, a big question was for those teams, for those leagues who decided to stop. How are we going to evaluate such an abruptly stopped season? What will we do? the answer of the Eredivisie was that they decided there will be no champion nor relegated teams. But the teams that would represent the Netherlands in the next year in the Champions League and Europa League, they were chosen based on the ranking of March 8 when it got stopped. The Belgian League made the same decision, plus they also declared that Club Brugge would be champion. And in the French League, they even went one step further and also relegated teams on the basis of the ranking at when they stopped. They made a weighted ranking because they looked at the ratio of points per match, because not all teams had played the same number of matches. And this has given rise to quite some anger in France. And to this end, I'm taking the French League One as a case study here. So this was the standing at the moment where the season got stopped. So you see here the points, the number of matches, and then of course the ratio of points per match. So, well, it was especially bad for some teams chasing for Europe, and who were all very, very close. And there was, especially from Lyon's side, there were quite some complaints that this was not the right way of choosing it. They were losing out a lot. They were indeed losing out the European season. So there was a lot of discussion around here. You can see really at the bottom end, it was pretty. I mean, for Toulouse, they were not complaining. It was obvious they were the worst team that season. Amiens, well, they were unhappier, of course, and PSG as champion was also quite dominant. But it was really in this part where the most discussions actually came up. So it's a scientific question. How can we find a fair way to evaluate such an abruptly stopped season? And there was no real response to this question before 2020. In cricket, there did exist the Duckworth-Lewis Stern way of doing, which is when a match is being stopped, how do you evaluate it? And it is stopped in the meantime, how do you evaluate it? But how can you do this for a season? So what I did with my PhD student, we made a statistical evaluation of the Belgian Jupiler Pro League, which we published in a news journal at Last News. We did this around April. Something similar was done by Guillaume, who used an ELO-based approach to evaluate the Premier League, and this got published in the Times. And then further nice approaches have come up. One by our chairman and Spieksma, and we will see this the true rankings also later on. Then one by Laszlo Schato, who's also somebody that many people know, and also Gori Koopman and Lit also came up with a very nice proposal. And what we did is what we did in this paper is that we further fine-tuned what we had done in our statistical evaluation in this paper, that's in this newspaper small article that we had done in April. We further fine-tuned this into a real research paper, and we called our approach the Probabilistic Final Standing Calculator. And there is some overlap with the proposal of Gori Koopman and Lit in terms of the way of proceeding. So what is the idea behind our PFSC? The idea is to assign to every team a playing strength by means of the bivariate Poisson model, which I think is very famous. Is it me, or am I always hearing some background noise? Okay, well, I don't know. I thought I would sometimes hear some noise, but okay. So for this, we are using the bivariate Poisson model that has been popularized by Karlis and Nsufras. So let YIJM denote the number of goals scored by team I versus team J during the match M. So we have N teams playing and M matches in total. And we write lambda IJM and lambda GIM, the number of expected goals by team I, respectively J, in this match. And then, according to the bivariate Poisson model, the joint distribution of the final score of both teams is given by this formula here, where in this formula we retrieve the two expected goals parameters lambda IJM, lambda GIM. X and Y stand for the respective number of scored goals. And we have another parameter, lambda C here, which is a positive covariance parameter representing the interaction between both teams. When this parameter is 0, well, all this sum here drops, and we are back to a product of two independent Poisson models. A crucial point here during the modeling is that the expected number of goals is given by this equation here. So where we have some general beta 0 intercept, this is actually the value that the basic number of goals that we would expect if a match were played on neutral ground and between two teams of equal strength. If one team plays at home, well then this home effect parameter comes into play, and here are the main parameters, Ri and Rj, the playing strength of each team. And so if one team is stronger than the other, if Ri is stronger than Rj, well then this is going to be positive, and this will increase the expected number of goals of I scoring against J. Now with this in hand, we can actually look at a period of M matches, and then we look at the overall likelihood of the outcomes of these M matches. So we take the product of these probabilities, where Yijm, Yjm was the actual score at the end of match M. And we can estimate all the parameters involved by means of maximal likelihood estimation. So by just maximizing, this this product here. So this is quite easy to do. Now you may wonder, why did we choose for this model in particular? It was initially proposed by Maher in 1982. Then it became in the spotlight by the paper Kalis and Soufras in 2003. And actually in another paper with my PhD student Hans, we have shown that this model is extremely good in forecasting future events and in representing the current strength of teams in this paper, and this in this 2019 paper here. And that's the reason why we opted for this model in particular. Now, how do we obtain the final ranking? Well, once we have estimated all the parameters, so the N team strengths, beta 0, H, lambda C, after X matches of a season, what are we going to do? Well, the remainder of the season, we simulated it 100,000 times via our model. And then after these 100,000 games, we can take an average on over these 100,000 simulations. And so what does this give us? It gives us for every team the probability to reach each position. That's why we call it the probabilistic final standing calculator, because we really get, okay, how often did a team end up ranked number 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. And we then divide this by 100,000, and we will get the probability for every team to reach each and every position. And so we have a probabilistic final standing. And so this is more fair play than, in our view, than just looking at the standing where a season got stopped, because it takes into account matches that are still to come. We are not neglecting if a team has only played against weak opponents or strong opponents. So those who played the strong opponents, they of course were unhappy when the match just got stopped, then the season just got stopped, and they cannot play the easier ones. So this would be avoided by our probabilistic final standing calculator, which we abbreviate PFSC. Now, of course, before showing you the results, one may wonder, how good is this PFSC? So what we did is we compared it to two richer models that take more into account than just the results of the games. So first, it's a similar model, also based on the bivariate Poisson, but this time we actually trained the parameters, estimated them on 2 seasons, the current and the previous season, and we gave more weight to recent matches. So it was a weighted maximal likelihood with more observations. And the second model, that's the model from Lars Magnus Vattum. It is actually based on plus-minus ratings. So it takes into account the players present in every team. So we compare our model to these two richer models. How did we do the comparison? Well, we evaluated it on several previous seasons from the big leagues. Because in our opinion, it would not be a good idea to say, okay, Germany continued to play. Let's see what our model would have predicted and see what the outcome was. Because when last season Germany resumed playing, this was under the Corona circumstances, which are not to be compared to what has been played so far in the season. This is why, to us, it seemed more scientifically correct to actually look at past seasons, virtually stop at various moments, and then simulate the remaining matches and compare with the real final standings, which were in line with what has been played in the season, and not without spectators or with teams suffering from losses because some players were positive or players being in a strange mental state because of the COVID-19 situation. We used 2 metrics of comparison for this one. The first one, I think you all are familiar with, the rank probability score, which is given by this formula here. And basically, it penalizes if you are saying that team J will win and it is team I wins. It penalizes this more than if you had predicted that team J wins and it is a draw. So we really look at how distant is the predicted outcome from the true outcome. And this is what you can see here. Xj is the predicted probability, so that we give to outcome to every possible outcome of a match. And Oj is the probability of the real result, so which is either 1 or 0, 1 if this was the result, and 0 for the other cases. So this was done on the base of every match, a classical way to compare models, prediction models. But what we also did is we used our new tool. So in this paper from 2020 with Klaus Ekström, Ulf Brefeld, and my PhD student Hans, we actually made an extension of the rank probability score, which we call the tournament rank probability score. So at the beginning of a tournament, you assign to every team the probability to reach each possible final spot. And then we compare how good these predictions were to the actual final outcome. And so you see the strong similarities. Here we have XRT are the predicted probability for team T to reach rank R, and ORT is the actual probability. So again, a 1 or a 0. And it's the same idea as with the RPS. If you are, the further away you are from the true standing, well, the more penalized it becomes. This is what comes out from this formula. So here is a first comparison that was done. Here you see the different seasons: England, France, Germany, Italy, Spain, and 2016, 17, and 18. Let me explain you what the curves are. In black is our PFSC. In red is the richer model that takes 2 seasons into account. In the blue here, or the dotted line, this is the plus minus ratings. So what we see is that from a certain time point on, like 20 match points, all 3 models are extremely close, and there is not one model dominant. And we can see that on the base of the RPS, I forgot to say this is the RPS, our PFSC catches up quite quickly. It is logical that in the beginning of the season it is further off because it lacks information. But then from, let's say, a third of the season on, it catches up. And it would not make sense. We just check this for all possible starts even so early, although of course we are aware that looking at this before half of the games at least were played would not make much sense, because you would not end the season after a third was played and then look, okay, what would be the most likely outcome. So we should actually look at these figures from the half on, and then we can see that all 3 models are quite close. And the same picture is obtained with the TRPS, the final prediction. We also see that all the models are extremely close, and so this shows that there is no real gain in going for the 2 more complicated models, which is why we decided to opt for the simple bivariate-Poisson model that we have proposed as our PFSC. And let me now show you what this gives us for the League One in France. So here you see the estimated playing strength. PSG was clearly the first. Lyon already comes up second with the estimated playing strength. So this might already hint that Lyon will end up better with our tool. And indeed, here are the predictions that you get. PSG was always in every simulation first. So they have 100% here. Marseille also was clearly the dominant team for the second position. Rennes and Lille were quite close on the third one. But then very interesting is Lyon. Lyon has 30% chance to be ranked number 5. And you can see in these spots here, Lyon has a quite high probability. So according to this, you would say that Lyon should be ranked up higher than they actually were. What we can also do is we can break this down to expected ranks, although this here is for us way more informative than just the expected ranks, but still, you can also look at expected ranks. And there you see that Lyon got an expected rank of 6.52. So they would end up higher than what was actually the case. As a reminder, they were ranked 7th behind Reims and Nice. With this expected rank, they would end up 5th. You can see that not much changes at the end. Amiens and Toulouse, they are still the last ones. And Also, if we look at the probabilities, Toulouse has a 98% chance to be last and only 2% chance to be second last, which doesn't change anything. But also for Amiens, they had 68% chance of being relegated. So, as a conclusion, our PFSC we consider it as a fair, certainly stochastic tool to evaluate abruptly stopped seasons. It gives the leagues the freedom to take individual decisions according to the probabilities. With the probabilities that they have, well, they can make the decision. They can say, okay, if we are above a certain threshold, then this team will be declared champion, or these teams will be declared to take part in the European Championship. What more could be done? Well, there's more, of course, but a further idea that we gave out is we can look at a compensation fund. Say if PI would be the prize money of reaching rank I, then, for instance, Marseille would have received this one. And Marseille had 77% to be second, 18% to be third, 5% to be fourth. So they would actually receive, this would be a fair share of win that they would receive. However, in reality, since they got ranked second, they would receive P2, the full P2. And so you could look at how much they could pay back to the compensation fund. So, and like this could be a fair way also to handle the prize money at the end of a season. But a lot more seems possible with these probabilities. And so all ideas, all nice comments are most welcome. And yeah, I thank you very much for your attention.
Okay, thank you, Christophe. Let's give a round of applause for this talk.
Are you muted, Roel?
Oh, yeah, I muted myself again. Yeah, now I'm okay. Frits,
Yes.
do you have a question?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the talk, Christophe. I sort of wondered, so I mean, a fundamental choice that you seem to make is that you sort of find results for matches that were not played. Mm-hmm. And in that sense, I wonder how you can reconcile that with sort of the claim that you give a ranking based on, you know, the results that have been played so far. There's a set of matches been played. You must make a ranking based on that, and you do that by sort of making up. But now I'm sort of exaggerating a bit, perhaps. But by making up results for matches that have not been played. I mean, why not restrict yourself to this set of matches that have been played, and only those?
Well, that's the reason for that is exactly actually what I had said here. The reason it's a very good question. The reason why we went for this is it seems to us that okay, there were still matches to come. If you don't consider the future matches that were still to be played, if there was, for instance, in France, a team that had played, let me go to this slide. Suppose that there was a team that had, like Nîmes, if they had played all the teams here from the top, and they were still to play the lower ranked teams, they would stand a higher chance to score against them. They have had really a tough program. If Metz had played only the lighter weight, so to speak, and they still had all the stronger teams ahead of them, then, well, of course, Metz would likely benefit from stopping the season earlier, because they were much more likely to not gain many further points. And this is why we wanted to simulate everything that is still to come. But the simulation, of course, is based on what the teams have done so far in the season. And so that's why we wanted to not leave out the matches still to come, because we found it fairer to look at, okay, what is still out there, and if a team plays, yeah, sorry.
No, I see your point. So you're saying that different teams have had different strengths of opponents.
That's it.
Yes, I see that. And of course, what you do is one way of dealing with that, but that need not. Okay, so this is not what you do is not a necessary implication of this fact. Of course, any ranking should take into account that there have been different strengths, that the teams have seen opponents of different strengths. I agree with that. But okay, yeah, okay, but thanks for the answer.
Yeah, thank you.
I see that Juan de dos Dios also has a question.
Well, hello, good morning. Well, it's a very interesting application, and I wonder if you can apply this idea to other settings. For example, it's very unusual that the competition is abruptly closed, is abruptly stopped, but in many cases you can use this approach to evaluate, to have a benchmark, to compare the performance of your team based on the expectations that the model gives you. So, for example, one team doesn't know if ending up in the first position or in the second position is a good outcome or not. So, based on this application, I think this is my question. You could evaluate this outcome.
Yes, you are totally right. This is a very good point. And actually, we have been. This past season, we have been in contact with the Belgian champion Brugge, who had actually asked about this. They wanted to know, okay, at the different moments, how are we doing now? How are our chances? So we were in regular contact with them to give them, okay, this is the standing as it is, as it now is. These are the remaining probabilities. So it goes a bit in the direction of what you just said. Yes, indeed, it is a very good, it is a correct point. You can use this also to evaluate how good a team did with respect to what could have been expected. Yeah.
Okay, I don't think that there are any more questions. At least I don't see them. So let's thank the speaker again, and then we can continue to the next talk.
Thank you.
The next talk is by Konaka.
Yes.
Yes.
Good morning.
Do you have everything set up? Yeah.
Can you see my presentation?
I think we can see everything now. Yeah, it's perfect.
Okay.
Well, let's just begin then, I think. So the next talk is by Eiji Konaka, and he's going to talk about the home advantage of major football leagues under the COVID-19 pandemic. Yeah, so go ahead.
Thank you for introduction. I am Eiji Konaka from Japan. The title of my presentation is Home Advantage of European Major Football Leagues under COVID-19 Pandemic. This is an outline of this presentation. In this study, I focus on the home advantage. The home advantage in sports is defined in this paper, the benefit that induces home teams to consistently win more than 50% of the games and a balanced home and away schedule. I made a simple survey at first over 120 football leagues all over the world. The source from here. This is a summary. In these matches, the number of the counts of win, draw, lose, and goals for and goals against are here. The bottom it shows the results for 5 major European leagues. These 5 major leagues means England, Germany, Italy, France, and Spain. I calculated the ratio by comparing the ratio between the all over the world and the 5 major European leagues. We can see that the home advantage of these 5 major European leagues is similar to the overall average all over the world. This figure is a summary. The horizontal and vertical axis shows the number of matches in one season and the win probability difference. This is a world average. The home advantage is positive all over the world. And this is a close-up, and UEFA leagues are emphasized. In Europe, in the most of leagues in the last 10 years, the home advantage was positive. This figure shows the basic stats for 5 major European leagues: the goals difference per match and win ratio difference. These orange dashed lines show the world average. So from this figure, this result, we can also conclude that the home advantage in 5 these leagues were positive, clearly positive. So we can see that the home advantage clearly exists in professional football. In this paper, the several possible causes of home advantage was listed. The first one is crowd effect. Crowd effect means that the spectators can affect to the final result of the football match. In the most of past studies, the key data was the number of goals and yellow and red cards, and the most previous studies assumes a balanced schedule. Here, let me go to the topic on COVID-19 pandemic. In the last year, almost all professional leagues all over the world was suspended from March because of the COVID-19 pandemic. In France, League 1 was cancelled in April. The other 4 leagues had been resumed by late June and finished by early August. So we have to point out that the resumed matches were closed. Closed means the match were held without spectators. So here is a main question of this study: is crowd effect vanished under the closed match? So let me summarize the objective of this study. The main objective of this study is to analyze the home advantage under COVID-19 pandemic. Is the crowd effect vanished? And in this situation, we have to separate unbalanced scheduled bias from the home advantage and the strengths of each team. The outline of the analysis method were here. Here. The proposed method is based on a pairwise comparison, and the home advantage and the team strength is calculated in short-term period. Finally, compare the time series of the home advantage between normal and closed situations. Here, let me summarize the situation of the closed matches under COVID-19 pandemic. In these 5 countries, this column shows the number of normal matches in 1920 season. And this column shows the number of matches, number of closed matches in this season. In France, there was no closed matches. So let me show you the basic stats: goal difference per match and win ratio difference. This large marker shows the home advantage in the normal situation in this season, 1920 season. So we can see that the home advantage is still positive and similar to the past 10 years. On the other hand, these large field markers show these stats under the closed situation. So it is clear that these stats reduced under the closed period. Moreover, in Germany, we can see the home disadvantage. These stats are negative. Here, I must point out that the unbalanced schedule bias should be separated from this home advantage. So let me go to the main body of this presentation. Let me explain the analysis method. In this analysis, a logistic regression model is used. A pairwise logistic regression model will be used. If team I played at its home against team J, the score ratio Sij is assumed to be expressed by this equation. Here, Sij can be defined as this equation, and Si is the goal of team I against J. Ri and Rj shows the rating. Rating means evaluation of strength of team I. And R home advantage K means the home advantage of the league K and in certain short interval of the season. The rating values Ri, Rj, and R home advantage are calculated to minimize the sum of squared estimation error. These rating values can explain the scoring ratio. After calculation, the values are converted to express the winning ratio. dk, the parameter dk is inserted here. In this equation, W hat means the expected winning ratio, and Wij means the actual win or lose. It can be represented by 1, 0.5, or 0. The parameter dk are calculated to minimize the sum of squared error. In the proposed model, it can estimate the rating of each team and the home advantage of the league simultaneously. Therefore, this method can separate team strengths from home advantage. And I think it is useful under the unbalanced schedule. And I use short-term estimation to follow the change of the home advantage. In particular, in this paper, 5 match weeks adapted. For example, if the home advantage at match week 29 calculation, the match result from match weeks 25 to 29 are used. at this time, the calculated home advantage considered to value of the normal situation. Similarly, at match week 32, the match result used in calculation mixes the normal and closed situation. Therefore, the home advantage at the match week 32 are classified, labeled as mixed. And similarly, at the match week 34, the home advantage is a value for the purely closed situation. This figure shows fit result. One example. This is English Premier League from match weeks 21 to 25. One marker shows one match, corresponds to one match, and the blue line shows a model. This vertical red line shows the home advantage at match week 25. So let me go to the main results of this research. This figure shows the main result of this presentation. This figure shows a box plot of distributions of our home advantage for 5 European leagues. The past means the match result from 2010 to 2019. Normal, mixed, and closed matches are defined previously. Between the combinations, Wilcoxon's rank sum test is used to test this null hypothesis. The home advantage from 2 different categories were the samples from continuous distributions with equal medians. Between the past and normal periods, the p-value is not so small. Therefore, there is no significant difference between the medians of the past and normal periods. On the other hand, between the past and closed and normal and closed periods, the p-value is sufficiently small. Therefore, a significant difference between these periods between these medians. So clearly, we can see that the median is reduced under the closed situation. So I insist that I can conclude that this is a strong quantitative evidence of the impact of the crowd effect on home advantage. So from here, let me show you the detailed analysis for each league. At first, the result in England. In England, in the closed situation, the basic stats, goal to difference and win ratio difference, was reduced. But on the other hand, the home advantage in the closed period has no significant difference from the past and normal periods. Intuitively, they are contradict, but I counted the number of home matches in the closed period. This figure shows a relationship between the final standings and the number of home matches. So please see this figure. In England, there is weak correlation between the final standings and the number of home matches in the closed period. In short, in England, weaker teams played more home matches in the closed period. On the other hand, there is no correlation in other leagues, Germany, Italy, and Spain. This figure shows a time series of the home advantage in the past and the latest season. There is no significant difference, but the median in closed period is much smaller than in the past normal period. This figure shows the result in Germany. In Germany, the home advantage is reduced and the difference is very clear. In Italy, the median in closed period is much smaller than the past period, but we cannot find any significant difference between past and normal situations. This figure shows the result in Spain. In Spain, median in closed period is much smaller than the past period, and there is significant difference between the past normal and closed periods. Let me summarize this presentation. In this study, the home advantage and the COVID-19 pandemic was analyzed. The outline of the analysis method is based on a pairwise comparison. The strength value of each team and the home advantage of one league was calculated in short term, in every short term. So I can separate unbalanced schedule bias from the home advantage. By comparing the time series of the home advantage between normal and closed periods, we can find the significant difference in home advantage from normal and closed periods. But the reduction amount was different among the leagues. Some leagues has very large reduction, but on the other league, there is a very small reduction. So I finished my presentation. Thank you for attention.
Thank you, Eiji. And let's give a round of applause to the speaker. Could you get your presentation back on for if people have any questions? Then they can ask something about the slide. And then I also want to ask, does anyone have a question? And if so, please raise your hand. Yeah, James, did you?
Yeah, I did. Sorry, I was a bit tentative there with my hand raising and going down. I just wanted to ask you about that, or two things, I guess. One was, you identify a crowd mechanism, and I wondered if you had any thoughts about whether that was because of the crowd influencing the teams or the crowd influencing the referee. And then the second question was, you may have touched upon this in your talk and I may have missed it, but you mentioned the variation across the different leagues. And I think that's one of the most interesting aspects of the reduction in home advantage under COVID without fans, is there's so much variation across different leagues. And I wondered if you had any explanation for that variation across the different leagues. Is it all to do with the unbalanced schedule, or are there other potential reasons for it?
I will answer your question one by one. What is the first question? But please.
Sorry, yeah, sorry. The question was, what do you feel is the mechanism? You say, I think it's clear there's a crowd influence on the outcomes, but does that influence go via the players on the field, or does it go through the referee?
Unfortunately, I'm not sure. Sure. So at least several papers, including your paper, to process this study. So I could not clearly figure out the mechanism under the home advantage of cloud effect. What was his second question?
Second question was just if you had any explanation for that variation you mentioned across different leagues, because there is huge variation in the reduction in home advantage across different leagues and competitions.
Difference or the league? You mean the reason, the difference between the leagues?
Yeah, I wondered if you had any thoughts about why some leagues had a big reduction in home advantage and some had quite a small reduction.
So at this point, I cannot clearly grasp the main reason. So one possible explanation is the stochastic effect. So
yep, the small samples.
So,
yep.
So the home advantage is reduced in average, but the variance is remained. So at one league here, at one league here. So I cannot clearly figure out the mechanism. So in this study, I only use a number of goals. So the number of goals inherently the stochastic the variable. So this effect cannot be reduced from the home advantage, I think. Is it enough? Is it okay?
That's fine. Thank you for your answer, and thank you for a very good talk. Very interesting. Thank you.
Thank you.
So anyone else with a question for the speaker? Yeah. Frits.
So just a very detailed one. So why the median instead of perhaps the mean?
So this is a restriction of the test method. I cannot pose any assumption on the type of distribution. It may not the normal or Poisson, or I cannot make any assumption on the distribution. So I have to use a Wilcoxon's rank sum test. This test compares the median, not mean. Okay. Therefore, I had only to compare the median in the distribution.
Perhaps another question. I can imagine there were situations where soccer matches were played not caused by pandemic, but also without a home crowd, like in the Olympic Games, or for instance, so is it possible to use those matches to sort of single out the particular explanations that James referred to understand which are the particular factors that explain the home advantage?
I think this analysis in several researchers searches under the closed matches under this pandemic. So this is one possible strong effect on crowd effect on home advantage. But in my analysis, home advantage still remains positive. So the difference is so the reduction amount is the crowd effect of total home advantage, I think. So I cannot clearly separate the main cause and the value and the quantity and value on the home advantage, I think.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Are there any further questions, or was that it? Okay. Let's thank the speaker again. Yes. And then the next talk will be by Macedo. Anthony Macedo, yes, and he's already here. Yeah. Okay.
I will try to share my presentation.
Yes.
Can you see it right now? Can you see my
yes, we can
presentation?
see it.
You still can watch my presentation now? It's okay?
Yeah. It's a full screen thing for me, at least.
So, as Roel said, good morning to everyone. As Roel said, my name is Anthony Macedo, and I'm a PhD student from the University of Aveiro in Portugal. My supervisors are Marta Ferreira Dias and Paulo Reis Mourão, and we developed this bibliometric review about the Super League of football. This study is part of my PhD thesis with the title Essays on Sports Economics, the European Super League of Football. And in addition to this bibliometric review, I made a literature review, which I will briefly mention. And to conclude, as I don't have much mathematics or econometrics to show you, I decided to show you some of the results of a survey I conducted almost 2 months ago. Although I have not yet treated this data, I think they can be valuable for our discussion. So now, some background. I suppose that all of you know what is the idea of Super League, but put very simply, it's the idea of grouping some of the biggest football clubs in Europe. And if you were on planet Earth in April 2021, all of you should know that 12 clubs announced the creation of a Super League, but very quickly the project was cancelled. However, this idea is not new. Already in the 60s, this idea was around, and Hopcroft, in his book The Football Man, suggested that it was not likely to materialize because of, 1, the cost and difficulties of traveling, and 2, the differences in lengths of the seasons in different countries. Later in the 80s, it was Silvio Berlusconi who threatened to create a Super League after a few seasons without qualification to the Champions League for AC Milan. In the early 90s, it was the big English clubs threatening to join a Super League, which led to the creation of the Premier League. In the late 90s, there was also the proposal from media partners of creating a Super League, which was called the European Football League, but it was stopped by the change to the Champions League that UEFA agreed to make. However, this failure of Super League in the 90s prompted the clubs to unite in the G14. So during the 2000, the threat continued to exist until the end of the G14. Finally, a few years later, in 2018, we had the revealed secret plans from top European clubs aiming to create a Super League. And perhaps those plans were related to this year's proposal. The idea of Super League is also present in academic literature. There are a few studies focusing on the Super League and several that devote only one section or make only a brief mention. There is a diversity of positions, and the discussion ranges from the Super League is the most natural solution for a polarized European football to the Super League would reduce consumer welfare and would be incompatible with European Union competition law. So, to mark the moment of the scientific involvement, my supervisor and I decided to do this bibliometric review. Regarding the methodological procedure, we then identify this search string we can see on screen. based on the analysis of some literature, and used Google Scholar to search at the end of last year. And why Google Scholar? Well, because using Web of Science or Scopus, we would only be able to search for these terms in the sections title, abstract, and keywords, while with Google Scholar we can search in all text. Just to show the difference, with Web of Science and Scopus, we would only obtain 8 relevant results, while with Scholar we got 190 after removing duplicates and screening. In this screening, we remove studies clearly not about Super League or studies published in magazines or bachelor and master theses. Then, to include the studies in our bibliometric review, we imposed an eligibility criterion, which was the study to be present in Scopus or Web of Science databases. So our bibliometric analysis considers 81 studies. Starting with the sources, we can observe in the table that the Journal of Sports Economics is one of the most important sources for this topic, being one of the journals publishing more Super League related studies, and specifically 6 studies. And it's also the most cited journal by the Super League related studies. Only the journal Soccer and Society published more Super League related studies, 8. And concerning citations, we have to be careful when looking at them because recently published studies tend to have fewer citations, and this may explain why there are some zeros in the table. Regarding authors, we can observe that Stefan Zimanski was the author with more Super League related studies, 7, but there are 4 authors with 4 studies published very recently. And using the bibliometric data, we also can create a co-citation map, as you can see in this figure. Here, an author in a bigger circle means he has more co-citations, and more distant authors means that the authors are less related. In this map, we can identify 6 clusters. We can see better here in this table. Each cluster has particularities. For example, one has authors generally discussing pro sports in general, and other cluster has authors more focused on football. I think I will not spend much time on this, but if for curiosity any of you want to know to which cluster it belongs to, please contact me later. I will tell you. Now looking at this figure, at this chart, now we can observe the evolution over time of publications related to the Super League. And I try to relate this evolution with several events in football. For example, we have a peak in 2000, which comes just after the proposal of Super League from media partners and the change of Champions League format. Follows the creation of the G14, and later in 2006-2007, there is another peak coinciding with the expansion talks of the G14 and the renegotiation of the Champions League format. However, just after that, in 2008, there are no publications, coinciding with the year in which the G14 becomes the European Clubs Association. Then, just before the first assessment of the financial fair play, we have another peak in 2012. In following years, it is difficult to identify specific events, but several reasons may be at the origin of these studies, such as the desire from top clubs to increase their revenues, or the lack of competitive balance in current domestic leagues, which could hurt the attractivity, or the pressure from media and sponsors. To conclude with the bibliometric indicators, we have here another map, but now it is a co-occurrence map of terms based on terms used in titles, abstracts, and keywords. And again, we can identify 5 clusters, showing that some terms are more related than others, and they present particularities in relation to the topics on which they are used, the year and the number of citations of the publications in which they are used, or their versatility here measured by the links of each term. To conclude with the presentation of this study, we can say that although the shadow of Super League has never entirely disappeared, the discussion in academic literature has generally been infrequent and brief. And I see two potential explanations for that. One is the lack of tangibility, because there are too much possible formats and features for the Super League, which requires to make assumptions to study the competition. And of course, there is no historical data of this competition, and to use data from other competitions implies to assume that supply and demand will have a similar behavior with the emergence of a Super League. Another potential explanation is the low credibility of the Super League threats in the past, as we don't really know if there was a real will of creating a Super League or if it was just a mean to control UEFA. The recent project of April 2021 may have been more convincing in terms of threat, and publications on this subject may increase in the near future. In future research, in addition to the relationship I already mentioned between the evolution in the number of Super League related studies and certain events in football, it could be interesting to compare this evolution with the competitive balance or competitive intensity in domestic leagues, or to compare with the revenues of top clubs. Very shortly, I will give you some clues about our literature review. We used the same 190 studies collected, but we didn't apply the eligibility criterion because we wanted to do the most comprehensive analysis possible. And we identify 5 main perspectives of discussion. One is the power struggle between governing bodies and top clubs. Another, of course, is the strengths and weaknesses of the Super League. Another one is the formats for the Super Leagues based on lessons from past ideas of cross-border football leagues and other sport leagues. Another perspective is the importance of broadcasting rights and media influence. And finally, the regulation of the European Commission. In terms of gaps in the literature, we have found that generally the supply and demand for the Super League are treated as the entire supply and demand for football. And little attention is paid to domestic leagues and in particular domestic leagues from outside the Big Five nations. Besides, as I referred in the bibliometric review, there is a lack of control for the potential impact that the Super League would have on demand by changing traditional habits and rivalries. There are also no studies that study the potential effect of a Super League on transfer market or youth development, and this may be an avenue for future studies. So finally, I will show you some of the results of my survey, and feel free to comment them. I haven't had time to treat the data yet, but they seem to say what we already expected. The survey collects consumers' evaluation of Big Five leagues, the Portuguese League, the Champions League, and the Super League. For some specific questions, we consider the format of Super League presented in April 2021. The aspects we evaluated were the level of interest, the willingness to pay, the perceptions of competitive balance, and the perceptions of quality of game. We had almost 600 responses, of which just over 300 were complete. Most respondents were males from Portugal or France, and 75% were at least undergraduate. So to the question, what is, or in the case of Super League would be, so what is your level of interest in the league on a scale of 1 to 7? Half the respondents answered their level of interest for the Super League would be minimum. On the other hand, the Champions League is the competition that arouses most interest. Regarding domestic leagues, we see that the level of interest for the Portuguese and French leagues is maximum for some respondents and minimum for others. I will need to look better at this, but I suppose this happens because Portuguese respondents are interested in the Portuguese league, but not in the French league, while French respondents do the inverse. Besides, the Premier League tends to be the most interesting Big Five league for the respondents. Concerning the perceptions of competitive balance, we see that the Champions League is considered the most balanced competition, followed by the Premier League, La Liga, and Liga. The results for the Super Leagues are kind of odd, as several respondents would expect a balanced competition, while almost 20% of respondents would expect the most unbalanced competition ever. This response, and to a lesser extent, also the response from this next chart for the assessment of expected quality of football played on the pitch, both responses lead me to think that there was some lack of objectivity on the part of the very, very, very anti-Super League respondents. Regarding the existing competitions, and as observed with the competitive balance, the Champions League and the Premier League present better evaluations. The willingness to pay is in line with the previous answers, being lower for the Super League and higher for the Champions League. Then, I asked the respondents to indicate their level of agreement with several statements related to the Super League, using a scale of 1 to 7, where 7 means that they totally agree. Most of them completely disagree that the Super League would be more interesting than the current competitions, and that choosing the participating teams based on market value is fair. They completely disagree. On the other hand, they completely agree that the Super League is opposed to the essence of football, and they completely disagree that it would improve the football industry. 59% agree to some level that the Super League should share a larger percentage of the profits with the national leagues. Almost the same percentage of respondents completely disagree that the Super League should be played on weekends, and 81% completely disagree that the Super League with only fixed teams would be preferable. An interesting result is that 37% would have some interest for several European League divisions. And the respondents are quite divided on the issue of banning players from national team for playing in a Super League. Finally, 52% completely agree that UEFA has been favoring clubs with higher market value. So, now just to conclude, I want to announce that in September, October, I will start a second round for the survey, as I pretend to test if there are differences between at the beginning and at the end of the season. So if anyone is interested in participating, please email me or add me on Twitter. And thank you to all for your attention.
Thank you, Anthony, for this talk. Let's give the speaker a round of applause. I'm hearing myself double. So now. Okay. Are there any questions for Anthony? Yeah, I see one. I saw one hand. Now I have to find out who it is. Okay, the one who's raising his hand, can you speak up?
Hi, thank you very much, Anthony. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Oh, okay, thank you very much for the presentation. Please, can you just go back to the slide before this last one? Okay, yes. So, I see that it says the ESL should share a larger percentage of the profits with the national leagues. Yes. Yeah, I just wanted to ask, probably in what you're going to also do in future is, are the respondents made aware of what is currently, or rather, I mean, I know you kind of mentioned that there's, sorry, that's not the question I wanted to ask. Sorry, it's the one concerning UEFA favoring the the bigger. Yes, exactly.
This
UEFA
one.
has been favoring clubs with higher market value. I just wanted to ask, is this possible to also put out some of the data concerning UEFA's distribution? So in terms of prize money, as well as yes, competition for competing in UEFA, putting out that information out there just so that respondents are made aware of it. Because if I'm not mistaken, UEFA shares total prize money based on 4 criteria. There's the first one, which is the National League coefficient, the coefficient system, and then as well as progression. So I don't know whether if that would be what putting out there, just so that respondents can have an idea of what is currently being done, or what was currently being done by UEFA, and what the ESL was proposing to do.
Okay, so that's a suggestion, right?
Yes, a suggestion. Yes,
It's not really a question. Yes, thank you. Yes, it should be interesting to do that. Here we work a lot with perceptions, so we don't say everything because we want to know we want to try to find the real reaction of a consumer. But yes, I think it's a good idea. Thank you.
Okay, does anyone else have a question for Anthony? James, you?
Yep, that's me. Hi, Anthony. Thanks. That was a really interesting talk. I guess it's a slightly unfair question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Is obviously, I think, as European football fans, kind of these legacy fans, we're the ones that really don't like the idea of a European Super League. But one of the reasons why a lot of these clubs want to go for it is markets wider than Europe. So I don't know if you've thought about trying to run your survey in, I don't know, different parts of Asia and other parts of the world where European football is very popular, to see what the differences in attitudes would be there.
So, sorry, can you repeat, please?
Basically, very simply, I'm just wondering, have you thought about doing your survey with a wider geographic spread rather than just Europe? Because
I tried,
yeah.
I tried my best to share my survey with the whole world, but most of the respondents are Portuguese and French, and I have answers from other 21 countries, but they represent like 20% of my sample.
It's really interesting. It's a very good. It's a very interesting survey. I just wondered whether there might be any distinctions. Did you find any differences between different nationalities, or was
I had no time to do that yet,
fine.
But at least I can see the difference between Portuguese and France, which is kind of important because I suppose that in a Super League we would have at least one French team, but we would not have a Portuguese team. So maybe they will have some difference in the results.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes. Okay, Anthony. So I also have a question.
Yes.
I was wondering, in your bibliography survey, is there any research done that compares this Super League to similar kind of Super Leagues in other parts of the world or sports? For instance, I don't know, maybe in Asia or in
not really
in the USA, that there are like there have been big mergers in the recent past regarding some.
No, there's no real comparison, and for sure there are no studies yet that compares with the last project because it's too recent. But we are going to have that for sure in less than 1 year. I'm sure of that.
Okay. Does anyone else have a question for Anthony? If not, then I would like to thank the speaker again for the talk.
Yeah, Anthony, can you just go to the last slide just so that we see your to connect with you? Yeah.
I stopped to share, right?
Yes, you stopped.
Okay. So now you should see the last one, this one.
No, I mean the last slide where you put your details. Yeah, exactly. Twitter, your email and.
Oh, sorry.
All right, thank you.
Any question? Any other question?
James?
Yeah, thanks. I guess just kind of following on from the last question is kind of thinking about historical similar, episodes and also parallel ideas. I mean, I don't know enough about it, but I understand the Belgian and Dutch, or the Belgian leagues voted recently to try and join with the Dutch leagues. Here in England, we are often told that the Rangers and Celtic in Scotland want to join the Premier League. And then further back, you have an example of a cross-border league in the Soviet League before the collapse of the Soviet Union, where teams from all around the Soviet Union, different countries or different, whatever they were called, the different units of the Soviet Union, played against each other. I don't know to what extent those kinds of things you've considered an overlap with this in any way.
We had some small examples. For example, there was the Bene League for women football. There was kind of a summer league between Denmark. No, it was Denmark, Sweden, and in Denmark, I think, too, and Norway, maybe. There was also in the Balkans plans to do that. There are small examples, but generally they are not the main league. They are like kind of a summer league. Only the Bene League was a real merge.
Okay. Yeah. So to elaborate on that a bit more, I think, for instance, if you look at now other sports, I would guess that within darts, for instance, if you would call it a sport, then they have like this tour of regular tournaments, but they also have which is kind of closed to outsiders, and then within that you also have like a Premier League, which is just an invitational that is very important money-wise. So that's also very popular, I guess. And I thought I had another example, and that these are maybe you could also say a bit the same about tennis, perhaps, because they like 10 years ago they restructured the system where everybody who is like ranked top 50 automatically gets invites to all the important tournaments, basically, and they have to play there as well. So that also feels like a super league somehow. It's but in a different setting with different sports, of course. But it might be interesting to compare those things.
Thank you.
Okay, I think that was it for all the questions. And then there will be one more talk, which will be given by me. And we're right on schedule. We're actually ahead, I would guess, because I excellently made sure that nobody took too much time for the talks. So James, should I just start then?
Sure, I can chair this one if you like. Keep you to time, or you've got plenty of time. So
okay. Well, let's share the screen then. Can you see this?
Yep.
Well, okay. Welcome everyone who is still here. This is the final talk of the session, and it's going to be about true rankings. And in the first talk by Christophe, this was already mentioned. This subject was already mentioned, so you might see some similarities with that talk. Based on joint work I did with Frits, my promoter at the TU Eindhoven. Okay, so it's March 2020, and these are the standings in the Dutch Eredivisie. This is the top 6 of the football league. And as you can see, Ajax is ahead on goal difference with the same amount of points as AZ. And I made horizontal lines to indicate differences in European football tickets. So Ajax will get a Champions League ticket, AZ will a qualification ticket, and Utrecht will not get anything at all, while numbers 3 until 5 will get Europa League tickets. And if you look closely, then you see that there are a few games missing, and there are, for the entire round of the 26th round, there are 2 matches missing, namely FC Utrecht versus Ajax and AZ versus Feyenoord. And these are very important matches, of course, because they're all happening within the top 6. And then the results of this match would actually can alter the standings as they are right now. So the big question here is the top 6 as we are looking at it right now the top 6 that's actually representing the strengths of the teams best? And why is this a big question for this particular setting? Well, this was the standings during the COVID outbreak when they cancelled the remainder of the Dutch Eredivisie. So the KNVB, which is the Dutch FA, was kind of caught by surprise. They didn't have any protocols for what to do when we cancel the entire competition. And then looking at the standings, they thought, well, let's just take it as it is and then distribute the tickets based on this. Well, as we just saw, there were some things that you could argue over, and if you can argue, you do argue. So both AZ and FC Utrecht complained a lot, and they actually went to court. It went on for months because AZ claimed that they should be champions, or at least get the Champions League ticket, as they beat Ajax twice. And FC Utrecht said, well, we are going to win our 26th game against Ajax, so we should actually pass Willem II, and we should get an Europa League spot. This is not fair. So lots of discussion, and the KNVB got very much critique in all the newspapers, and everybody was angry. And yeah, as I said, they went to court. Because why didn't the KNVB take into account that some teams had better opponents, worse opponents, and some teams had played more matches? Why did they just take the standings as they were? So, well, what else could you do? Well, for instance, this is us suggesting something as mathematicians interested in sports. What you could do is, we said, you could look at the ranking that we called the true ranking, and that was based on an idea that's like over a century old, and it's very well described by Keener in 1993, actually, I think. And within this ranking, this true ranking, AZ and not Ajax would have been number 1. And as also mentioned before by Christophe earlier this morning, other alternative approaches were mentioned across the globe, because this was like a global problem, as is the entire pandemic, of course. So Laszlo Tsato, he used a generalized sum method, and Guillaume proposed some ELO type ranking, and then you had all kinds of sports data bureaus who were simulating competitions, and similar things were done by Van Eetvelde and others using maximum likelihoods, and they all came up with different approaches. And for everything you could say, you can argue against or for it. Yes, but we are going to focus now more on the true ranking that we proposed, because we want to show you and ourselves how good it actually is if it is any good. So the true ranking ranks all the teams based on their strength, SI. And this strength we call that is based on the outcome of the matches and the opponents of those matches. So if you would put that in a more question. So how can you determine the strength of teams if it sort of depends on the strength of teams? Well, we do this by the following approach. We let A be the result matrix, where we normalize all the results. So that's just the ijth entry of the matrix is all the points scored by team I versus team J divided by all the matches played by I. Not only against J, but like all the matches. And then we want SI to be in such a way that there is a factor, lambda, for which this formula holds. I have a mouse, yes, for which this formula holds. So SI should be a linear combination of points scored times the strength of the teams you scored them against. Yeah. So if this lambda is the same for all the teams, then the S that we get is actually an eigenvalue vector, as you can see. And then this would hold that the following equation is true. So how do we get this S, and is it unique that this would hold? This was very nicely described by Keener, that this S is, you can find it using a theorem by Perron-Frobenius, that this S is unique if you take the biggest eigenvalue, and then the S that you get is actually in real valued, so no complex values occur. And the only thing you need is that the result matrix A should be irreducible. And irreducible in this here means that there should not be a subset of teams U that's beating all the teams that's not in the subset U. So like if you look at I think Liverpool 2 seasons ago, they won all their matches in the first 11 rounds or something, making the result matrix up until the 11th round irreducible, because the subset Liverpool would beat all the teams that they met at that time. Okay, and it is important to notice that if you would have all the matches played, then the true ranking that you would get using the result matrix is not necessarily the same as the final ranking that you would get in the regular competition. And this might be an issue at the end of the season, but halfway through the season, it's not per se a problem. Because and then for the Eredivisie, this would, for instance, be the top 6 using the true ranking, and we see, as we mentioned also in the newspaper, that AZ would be ahead of Ajax, so they would rightfully go to court over the decision from the KNVB. But how good is this true ranking? Because we can say, well, use the true ranking and AZ is ahead, but what does that mean? And why should you use the true ranking and not just the regular standings? So we want to actually compare the ranking methods. And what do we want to compare it for? We want to compare it as a, how good is it as a predictor for the final ranking, R star. So there are different ways of comparing two rankings, of course. I mean, you can think of many ways, but I will just name a few. For instance, you can just take a ranking and see, if you compare it with the final ranking, and see how many teams are placed at the exact same spot. And then that is the score the ranking gets, and you want to score as high as possible. Another way of looking at it is looking at the sum of ranking differences. So if you are ranked second in your predictor, but you finish 4th, that's a score of 2. And that is then again a score you want to minimize for. And another way of looking at it is taking 2 teams, I and J, and see if which of the teams is ranked higher in your prediction. And if the same order holds in the final ranking, then you have a good prediction for this pair of teams, and otherwise you would have a wrong prediction. So let's say pairwise ordering, and this is actually equivalent to a thing called Kendall's tau, which is a widely used method to compare rankings. And you can scale the performance from -1 to 1 using this tau, where -1 means that you're completely wrong, like it's the exact opposite, and 1 is that you're completely right. And now, to illustrate this a bit, so suppose we have a competition of 5 teams, and this is the ranking. On the left is the ranking that we are predicting, and on the right is the ranking that we are trying to predict. Then we see that it's not a very good prediction that we gave, but some parts may be correct. For instance, team B is on the right spot. And there's 10 pairs of teams that you can make, as there are 5 teams, and 4 are in the wrong order. We have C above B, well, whereas it should be the other way around. And we have C above A, which is also wrong, and we have B above A, which is also wrong, and we have E above D, which is also wrong. And the other 6 pairs are correct. Yeah, you can check that for yourself if you don't believe me. Which means that the tau, which is the difference of the right ordered teams with the wrong ordered teams divided by the total number of pairs in the ranking, is 0.2. Okay, so now we have this way of comparing rankings, and we are going to compare the predictive performance given by tau of the ranking as it is, RC, with the true ranking, TR. And for this we used data of 10 seasons, 2010 until 2019, and we used 4 competitions: Primera Division, Premier League, Serie A, and Ligue 1. And we use these 4 competitions because they have a few things in common. They are all double round robins. There are no playoffs in the competition at the end. And they all consist of 38 rounds or 20 teams, which is, yeah, nice, because we are going to compare them round-wise. So, and if you are in the 34th round of a 34-round competition, that's different, of course, than if you have 38 rounds in total, for instance. And then to make sure that the problems that I mentioned before, using irreducibility of matrices, of the result matrix, is handled correctly, we compare starting from around round 11. So that the results have a sort of irreducibility, you could say. And these are the results. And then to explain the graph that we're looking at, so on the x-axis we see the rounds, so it's 11 up until 38, and then we see the difference in the tau score by the true ranking and the current ranking. And if it's above 0, then the true ranking scores better, and if it's below 0, then the current ranking would score better. And well, if you are closely paying attention, then you see that most of the results actually show that the true ranking is a worse predictor for the final results than the current ranking is. Well, at the end of the season, that's of course makes sense, because for instance, in the 38th round, the current ranking is exactly equal to the final ranking, so that will be like a perfect predictor. But also in the beginning, there is still a constant, it's constantly slightly, even more or less outperformed by the just the simple current ranking. And that is, I think it's a remarkable result, because you would think that doing something with the playing strength of your opponents and the schedule ahead would make a difference compared to not doing anything at all. There are a few things to be said about this, and that's of course that, for instance, when the season is ending, some teams have nothing to play for anymore, or have something to play for in another competition, like a Champions League semi-final, where they will rest players. Whereas other teams are like very much ahead and think like, okay, we should continue fight for our chances. So that might skew some results. And it could be that if you have a good run of results at the beginning of the season, playing like not the best teams, that it boosts your confidence and that you could like outperform your actual level for the rest of the season somehow. And that has a slightly, a slight impact on the results of the games ahead. So meaning that when you are ahead, you kind of tend to stay ahead in the rankings. And the true ranking might overvalue upsets. So if a lower ranked team beats a higher ranked team, then the lower ranked team gets like lots of quality points by the true ranking, whereas in real life you only get 3 points. So that might be a thing. And then this could be the conclusion that we should not have said this at all. However, we didn't like this, of course. So we came up with an idea. Maybe we could combine the true ranking with the current standings to make a better predictor. Because one of the issues is that if we look at the true ranking, that it doesn't converge to the final ranking at the end. And to solve this, we introduced a hybrid ranking. And the hybrid ranking is a ranking that after, for instance, K rounds, you just take the teams for a team I, the amount of points it scored, and how many points it scores per match. And then you look at the strength it gets by given by the true ranking compared to the strength in total given to all the teams by the true ranking. And then this is how we calculate the hybrid score, which basically says, okay, so the points that you have that you can keep, and for the remainder of the competition, we are going to distribute the points using the relative strength given by the true ranking. And then, so when the entire season is over and there are no more rounds to be played, so K is 2n minus 2, then the right-hand term would be 0 and HI would be just AI, the regular scorings. And halfway, you could think that maybe like if you outperformed somehow or underperformed in the first half of the season, then that would be compensated by this right-hand term. Okay, and these are the results that we got from the hybrid ranking. It's again the same picture as before, the same graph as before, but then comparing the tau score of the hybrid ranking with the current ranking, and it scores better, way better. For instance, at the end, of course, in the 38 rounds, it scores just as good as it's the same ranking. It still slightly outperformed most of the time, you could, but not as convincingly. And there are even rounds where the hybrid ranking would score higher than the, on a median level, than the current ranking. So that's, better, I would say. And we can just look at the scores, the tau score, the average tau score per round over for all the three different predictors that I've shown in this talk. And well, what you can see is that the blue dots are clearly lagging all the time, whereas the hybrid score and the current ranking are like more or less on the same level all the time. So it's the hybrid ranking does perform better, and it might give some insight in what's going to happen that the current standings are not able to give. Okay, so some concluding remarks. The true ranking seems to be a worse predictor for the final ranking than the current standings. And the hybrid approach seems to be of about the same level. We might need some more research and more data, actually, because 40 seasons is not that much. And it would be a nice idea and to just take a random set of matches instead of rounds to see what ranking would predict best, to compensate for season-ending weirdness that you could see in normal competitions, or to see if other combinations of the true ranking and the current ranking would get you to a better predictor. Well, that was the talk. I hope I'm good in the time. Are there any questions?
Thank you very much. First of all, we need to give you a round of applause. So, thank you very much, Roel. That was a very interesting talk indeed. We've got 3 hands up in quick succession, and I think Dries was the first one.
Okay, Roel, the way I see it, there are 2 approaches for this problem, right? Mm-hmm. There is the approach that Christophe has followed, who has predicted the remaining games, and then you come to a predicted final ranking.
Yeah.
And then there's your kind of approach. You say, well, I don't really care about these remaining games. I'm not going to predict them. I'm just going to try to estimate the strength at this particular round where the competition stops. Now, for Christophe's approach, I think it makes much sense to compare his predicted ranking with the final ranking. But for you, it doesn't. I mean, I think you make your life difficult because you're in fact you try to estimate the strength at this particular round 25 or whatever. So why would you compare that with the strength at the end of the season, which may very well just be different?
Yeah, but the idea of okay, so the season ends some point, like halfway or after 25 rounds, and then you want to justifiably give away tickets. And one way to look at this is say, okay, what is the seeing what has been played so far, what would be a good way to distribute the tickets? But that should be in line with the final results if the season would be totally over. You would imagine, right? Otherwise,
I don't know about that.
That is the way that you say, like, there's a reason the standings are what they are. Yeah, after all rounds have been played, that is how where you usually would go for, right?
Well, I don't agree with that, and I don't have a real better alternative. Huh? But, and I see you want to do something to evaluate your method, but I think you're not really comparing with what you're aiming for. And it's natural that you
okay, so you can say that the true ranking is a thing on its own, and that just gives you the strength, whereas the normal competition standings fail to do that in a proper way. You could,
the normal competition standings give you the strength at the end of the season, and that might be very different from the strength at round 25 or whatever, because something happens.
That is
right?
true.
Teams do not have the same strength throughout the season. They may have a better period and a worse period.
No, that's very true. Yeah,
it's just a thought. I don't have an alternative.
Of course, you don't want to really estimate what's going to happen in the matches that are ahead, like match per match. No, I agree with that. But the competition schedule that's used doesn't give any extra points for beating teams with a higher, with more goal, with a higher goal difference, for instance, either. Or if you just win, you win. If you draw, you draw. And how you get there, that's not estimated by the competition strength. So if you want to estimate the team strength, then you're always doing something else than just looking at the standings, I guess. Right?
Yeah.
But if you want to make a decision at some point, you still need to make it in line with how you would usually do it, which is just the standings as they are. So
the problem is that there is no objective way to estimate or to evaluate the strength of teams at one particular moment, so you don't really have anything to compare with. Right?
Yeah, no, it's true. True.
Well, thanks.
Thanks, Dries. I think the next person, I don't actually know who it was. I'm going to go with Christophe and then Martin for the next 2 questions.
Thank you. So I think it was Yeah, my remark was on the one hand side a bit similar to what Dries just said, that in some sense, if you look at this, I mean, it's, even though you are not, it's not predicting what is remaining, but still with whatever method one does, the goal is to find a fair way to end the season as if it had been played, even though the matches are not predicted. One does as if every method somehow takes it into account, even by, I mean, when you look at the strength of a team at a current moment, of course, you also take into account the teams it has not yet played against, because this would change the strength. So I think it is always somehow inherent. In our example, it's more directly present because we are estimating, we're looking at the future games. In yours, you are not doing that, but still you take into account the games that haven't been played because they would have affected the strength. So I think it's yeah, in that sense it's a bit hard. But what I actually wanted then, since Dries made that comment, what I also wanted to suggest, that's more perhaps the general suggestion, and I think Jay, for everybody here, so we have seen various different approaches for this problem, which brings up a general question of how to best predict remaining seasons, or how to best evaluate a current standing to give some more information than what is out there by the given table. And I know that David First also is currently making a very nice proposal for that. So yeah. I would suggest, should we not make somehow a workshop on that topic with many people involved in it?
Yeah, that seems like a very good idea indeed. Yeah. Because so maybe we should discuss this over lunch, virtual lunch.
Yeah, but also, what is a good evaluation method?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So there's so many things that you need to discuss, comparing rankings, doing predictions, and
yeah. So that was my suggestion.
Yeah, very nice suggestion.
That's a great suggestion. Thank you, Christophe. I think it's, I mean, the thing about, about sport is that we got lots of data to evaluate these things. Obviously, Roel, you've done some really interesting work there looking at recent seasons and how the true ranking does. Before I whittle on, I want to go to Martin, so he can ask his question.
Hi there. Yeah, my question is somewhat similar to the first question, or part of it. So you looked at the standings midway and the true rank midway as a way of predicting the final standings. I wondered if you looked at the converse question of trying to predict the final true rank. And you partial true rank and partial standings as a predictor of that.
Yes, I've done that as well. And then, of course, the true ranking is a better predictor for the true ranking at the end of the season. So that is that if that answers your question. I don't have the picture in the slides here, but I do have the data. Here somewhere on my computer.
Great, thanks. I mean, there's I guess the underlying philosophical question is, do you award people prize money or tickets because you thought they were the best team, or because they won the process of going through the tournament? And I think your argument that you maybe want to simulate the process of winning the tournament, so that's the to measure against is a reasonable one. It's not 100% clear to me that it is necessarily the right one.
No, indeed, true. It's a choice you have to make, right? If you are planning on giving the best tickets to the team that did the best during the season, or if you're giving the tickets to the team that's most likely to win the competition.
Okay, thanks, Martin. And then we've got Frits with a question.
Yeah, well, it's not really a question, just commenting on. So, I think it is nice to sort of look at it from the viewpoint of the league organizer. that has to distribute these tickets, and then and then what do you do? And then okay, I guess it's sort of a crucial decision whether or not you're going to sort of simulate what it would have happened, or just look at something that only takes the matches into account that have been played so far. And I sort of second Christophe's idea to sort of it will be interesting to sort of have a workshop and debate all the nice ideas and avenues that exist, and that should sort of find a satisfying answer to that question. I'm sorry, just this is not a question.
Thanks, Frits. Something I was going to say was, I think it's a little bit related to Martin's point and a few other points, is I was quite, it's striking as you presented, Roel, that the actual rankings do really well to the true rankings, and that kind of suggests, well, does that mean therefore that 3 points for a win is a really good system and 1 point for a draw is a really good system in football, or does it suggest that teams have adjusted to that and therefore they play to that, and that's kind of a function of or leads to the outcome that we see? And the only kind of practical thing I'm thinking is whether you might apply the method to seasons and competitions with different points scoring.
Yeah.
For example, when it was 2.
Yeah, so it's obviously applicable to other point systems as well. And it is maybe if you could compare that in a good way, then you can see maybe how teams kind of play the competition instead of play the game, right? So if you get 3 points and 1 point for a draw, that might change the way how you play, especially at the end of the seasons, I guess. Compared to if you would just play the ball for 90 minutes around and try to score as much as possible.
Yeah. And just to give you some examples, I mean, I think you could probably think about looking at European leagues only switched to 3 points for a win in the mid-1990s. So you've got seasons before then. In England, we switched to it in the early 80s. And I also come across some strange points changes that were in place in various leagues in Eastern Europe in the Soviet system, where teams didn't get a point for a draw if they got a certain number of tries in the season, and if they scored certain numbers of goals, they got extra points and bonus points and things like that.
Yeah, volleyball also has like a difference. If you win 3-2, you get 2 points instead of 3, I guess. But I was also thinking that it might be nice to see how this does if the new Champions League format is there, when you have like a round robin that is not completely played out. But that's in a few years when that is actually organized. Okay,
excellent. Well, I think we'll probably we might as well wrap up the session and give ourselves a well-earned half-hour break. So thank you very much to Roel. Thank you to the other presenters in this first session. So Christophe, Eiji, and Anthony as well for some really interesting talks. And encourage you all to get off the screen, go and take a bit of fresh air and a walk, and we'll reconvene in about half an hour's time.